From a dreamer to an interpreter. Genesis chapter 40 verse 1 to 23. Amos chapter 1 verses 3 to chapter 2 verse 6. Matthew chapter 5 verses 1 to 16. Introduction. Do you know someone who can interpret dreams? Last week, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt and he was bought by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh from the Ishmaelites. Joseph became successful in the land because Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was with him, and even Potiphar saw it, so he made Joseph an overseer of his house and all that he had. One day, the wife of his master seduced Joseph to lie with her, but he refused. Until the time when Joseph was alone working inside the house of his master, the wife seduced him again. This time, the wife of Potiphar took the garment of Joseph, and she used it to convince Potiphar that she was mocked by Joseph. So Potiphar took Joseph and put him into prison. But Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was with Joseph, showed mercy and favor through the warden of the prison, and he committed to Joseph's care of all the prisoners there. Now while Joseph was in prison, the cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh offended him and made him decide to send them to prison. According to the Midrash, an ancient commentary on part of the Hebrew scriptures, attached to the biblical text, the offense of the cupbearer, a fly was found inside the cup of the Pharaoh, while the baker, a stone was found inside the bread and Pharaoh had almost eaten it. Then these two had a dream, but no one inside the prison could interpret it and made them sad. Joseph encouraged them to share their dream and by telling them that interpretations belong to Adonai. So why did Joseph dream before and this time he interprets? He dreamt because it refers to his future role. Let's go back to his two dreams in Genesis 37. In verse 5 to 7 it says, "Now Joseph had a dream, and he told his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, 'Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf.'" His second dream was in verse 9 and it says, "Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, and said, 'Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me.'" These two dreams of Joseph were related, and it's all about the time when he will be exalted in Egypt as a governor, and that's the reason why he interprets the dream of the cupbearer and the baker. After he interpreted the dream of the baker and the cupbearer, it came to pass. On the third day, which was the birthday of Pharaoh, the baker was hanged while the cupbearer was restored to his position, but he did not remember Joseph. In chapter 41, when the time came at the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh had a dream, but there's no one inside the palace who could give an interpretation, and there the cupbearer remembered Joseph and he mentioned him to Pharaoh. Then he sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the prison, and this will be the start of the fulfillment of Joseph's dream. Our Torah portion is a reminder to us that Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh works in unfathomable ways. In Haftarah, Prophet Amos gave his words concerning the judgment of the nations, mostly the neighbor countries of Israel. Based on the phrase, 3 transgressions and for 4, their sins were lavish. Amos first mentioned the judgment of Syria, which the capital is Damascus. Adonai will send fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad, which means, son of the god. Second, Amos mentioned Philistine. Adonai will send fire upon the wall of Gaza, which is the most important trade city. Third, Amos mentioned Phoenicia, Tyre, and same as the first 2 nations, Adonai will send fire upon its wall because they delivered up the whole captivity, Judah, to Edom, and they forgot to honor the covenant of brotherhood, which is about the relationship between Israel and Phoenicia. Then Amos also mentioned Edom, Ammon, and Moab. Surprisingly, Amos mentioned Judah and Israel, because they transgressed the Torah of Adonai. Our Haftarah is a reminder to us that Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh hates wickedness. We can't go on sinning because his mercy has limitations. If his line is crossed, then it's over. Psalm chapter 19 verse 9. The judgment of Adonai are true and righteousness altogether, Our apostolic portion deals with the 8 Beatitudes of Yeshua. These 8 start with the word blessed, which comes from the Greek word makarios, meaning happy and fortunate. Poor in spirit means being humble. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 19 says, "Better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly, than to divide the spoil with the proud." Those who mourn means a change of heart because of genuine repentance after being guilty of sin. Meekness, however, means gentleness, Galatians chapter 5 verse 23. Hungry and thirsty here means seeking the righteousness of Yeshua. Psalm chapter 63 verse 1. O God, you are my God. Early will I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you, in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. Merciful means after we receive God's mercy, we have to extend it to others. Pure in heart means internal purity. Since the heart is the center of our body, the Torah of God should be inside of it. Peacemakers in Greek is irenopoios, which means peaceable. To offer and make peace to others, we must first be at peace with God. Lastly, persecuted for righteousness here means to partake of Yeshua's suffering, 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 13. Messiah Yeshua gave us an example of how he lived through these 8 Beatitudes. Since the meaning of blessed is happy and fortunate, if we live these Beatitudes we can experience genuine happiness. The connection of our parasha is about being a light to others. In Torah, in spite of Joseph's imprisonment, he became light to the officials of Pharaoh by interpreting their dreams. In Haftarah, Israel and Judah should be a light to other nations since they are God's covenant people, but they failed. In Apostolic, Yeshua gave the 8 Beatitudes, so if we live by them, we can be light and salt of the earth. Back to my introduction. Joseph offered to interpret the dream because he knew that his God will be the one to provide the interpretation. If God speaks to Joseph, he can speak to us as well because his word is living and powerful, Hebrews chapter 4 verse 12, and we can entrust to him everything for he knows each one of us. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 13. And no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Shabbat Shalom.